Hello, coaches. Welcome back to another episode of Coach Better Spotlight. We're trying something a little different today. Due to COVID-19 quarantine over the last few months, I was able to record many, but not all, of our Coach Better conversations for the upcoming season well in advance. So in today's episode, we're highlighting some great moments from these conversations to give you a little sneak peek into our second official season of Coach Better. I'll take you on a quick tour of all the guests and the episodes so that you have some context for those conversations. Not every episode is included here because not all of them have been recorded yet, but you'll get an overview of the two key themes we have for this semester. We're starting with how coaching can support social justice work in our school communities, and ending the semester with how coaching and leadership intersect in many different ways. I hope you enjoy this preview episode of our next season of Coach Better. If you do, please let us know so we can continue to keep making them. Leave us a comment on social media at Eduro Learning or join our Facebook group to let us know what you think. And of course, if you enjoy today's episode, you are going to love all the new learning opportunities we have for coaches. You can find them at COACHBETTER.tv, and you can find even more professional learning opportunities at our home website, EduroLearning.com. Check them both out and let us know what you think. Welcome to our Season 2 Coach Better Sneak Peek. We have lots of great episodes coming up this semester, and here are a few highlights selected from our conversations that have already been recorded. We're starting with a panel discussion about the difference between working with teams and working with individuals as a coach, where Maggie Haas-McLean has some advice on articulating the purpose of each meeting.
So one of the things I remember in my training was being able to distinguish between dialogue and discussion. And I think there's a place for both, but I think we need to know which is happening when. The really important thing in dialogue is actually listening, because you want to understand where the other person's coming from. But then at some point you need to move forward because you have to make a decision, like, what are we going to do? Or what tools are we going to use? Or, what are the lessons going to look like, and so on. And I think that there then comes a point where you shift from dialogue to discussion, and the purpose of that is just to make a decision about something. And I think if everybody knows this is the purpose of what we're doing, then everyone comes out of the meeting feeling that they've achieved something.
Next up, we have Ken Shelton on the unique advantages coaches have when working with teachers on bringing an equity lens into the classroom.
So all coaches are in a very unique position, because coaches are in a position to be both the observer and the supporter. You know what I'm saying? You can, as a coach, in the context of your role on campus, you are in a unique position. Of course, this requires the awareness and then the initiative to say, I'm going to become the informed observant of the dynamic between the students themselves, and then share that with a teacher where, it's not a knock on teachers by any stretch, but I know as teachers, and I know this to be true for myself as well, so I can even put myself in that category. When you get immersed in teaching and you get immersed in the learning environment, you don't necessarily catch some of the nuances of the interactions with students. And so that's where with coaches, it's like you can be that extra set of eyes, that extra perspective, if you will, on what's happening within the context of the classroom.
In the next clip, Dr. Sausan Jabber, who is also part of our amazing new Women Who Lead project beginning this semester and a Mastermind Ed cohort facilitator, shares her perspective on how technology access for students is an essential component for equity.
So before I even answer that question, I'm going to go as far as to say that you can't have equity in education without technology. It's impossible. Technology is not a luxury that we want to use or don't want to use anymore. It's a necessity. And I think that the things that we're able to do with that, in my opinion, and I've been teaching for a really long time, and I started out very traditionally because when I started teaching, we had dial-up technology where you actually had to connect your wire and hear the connection. So there was no one-to-one, there was no technology use, there was none of that when I first started teaching. So I can tell you that, and obviously I hope that, you become a better teacher with time and that you're constantly growing and changing, but I can't even start to compare the conversations that we had 20 years ago when I first started teaching to the conversations we're having today. But I want them to think about authentic audience. And then we talk about, what does that mean? Like here we talk about now word choice, which is essential for writing and speaking. We talk about, like, how do I organize my information so that it's something that is receptive to this specific authentic audience? So you, without even thinking about it now, are able to like embed and integrate all of these important skills that kids have been learning throughout their career, but also are college and career skills that they need in order to be successful as whatever they're going to be in their career lives, but also, we know, building stamina and giving them skills that they need to be successful at college level. And so I think that accessibility is equity in a big way, and giving them those windows into so many different communities and giving them also time. Like we're also talking, let's talk about students that need more time because they have disabilities, for example. I'm giving them access to the learning in multiple different ways beyond the 45 minutes of our classroom period. And I'm telling them, you can go back and add to your reflection later. If, for example, you walk out of my classroom and something happens in science or social studies or lunch that you feel like relates to this topic that we were talking about today, you can go back and modify your response or add to it later. And so if I have that child who needs that processing time, they have the time to process, and they have the time to go back, and they have the time to edit and change and add and work on and have those direct conversations with me. Whereas when we were talking about paper and pencil and direct conversation, the limitations are huge. But we didn't even know that because technology wasn't an option then. And so for us to deny the benefits of technology, I think, without being like, I just think that really speaks to our own flexibility to adapt to best practices and research-based strategies in our time. And you're definitely not doing it justice to your students without seeing those things.
And now we have Darell Fine, another one of our Mastermind Ed cohort facilitators, describing how our values are embedded in all the work we do as educators, as well as in the technology we use and how we use it.
It all starts with mission and vision. Like even what you're saying about like technology, it's designed by people, and people carry value systems, and those value systems influence design. And if the very purpose of technology is to meet human needs and to solve human needs, if you're solving a human need, that is a matter of equity. You want to make sure that that problem that you're solving is a solution of practice that improves people's lives. Technology is amazing how it connects us. So for me, I don't like functioning according to binary thinking, but in education, sometimes it's either or. You're either here to look at education as a practice of freedom, or you're here to reinforce the status quo. And the people that I work with, that I align myself with, are usually wanting to look at education as a practice of freedom to build critical thinkers.
In the next clip, Elisa Perez talks about how to teach and coach with an equity lens, even if the subject doesn't seem to have a natural connection.
Looking at setting some norms with teachers around skill development and talking about skill development and like what we want from students. And I know that you have these standards and these objectives, and then having that coaching conversation of like, what do you want them to be able to do? What are some of the skills, like with a science class, inquiry and questioning and so having that conversation of, okay, so how can we develop that skill where they're learning some of this content, but they're also looking at it through the lens of how this plays out in the world? Because everything, I was in a webinar earlier today, and one of the speakers was talking about, in just like, the first thing that we have to understand is, as practitioners of justice, as co-conspirators, as aspiring allies, is that this work is everywhere and all around us. It's in the air we breathe. And so having that conversation, like science has been used to oppress. Math has been used to oppress. Math has been used, when you look at, there's so many examples of how these contents have been used historically to create racial hierarchies, to establish systems of oppression. And so it's flipping that on its head and asking, how can we also use this content for the work of liberation, for the work of the humanity, for the work of justice.
Next up, we have Allison Robinson, reflecting on 2 key themes for planning professional learning, inspired by The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker.
So the 2 ideas that seem to be resonating the most with individuals as we kind of work through some of these pieces, one is the idea of excluding well. So too often in education, we think that everybody should be in every space just because that's, we're inclusive by nature. We want everyone there. And what ultimately happens is sometimes those spaces get cluttered. And also we have individuals who are in those seats that don't really either need to be there or want to be there. So really pushing both leaders and facilitators to be thoughtful about who we're inviting to each of those professional learning spaces, why they're there, and what we hope that they will gain from the experience would be the first thing. And then the second idea is this one of hosting well. Too often we put the burden on our facilitators to manage all of the logistics, to deal with the tech. And you walk into these workshops and they're running after chart paper and markers and all these other pieces. And they're not able to really tend to the conversations and the relationships that are happening in the room. So I think the more that leaders and co-facilitators can do to kind of preserve that space for one another to host well, the better space we will be in to really create these effective and hopefully even magical learning experiences for teachers and leaders.
In the next clip, Tanya Gilchrist discusses the importance of building strong relationships as your first priority as a coach.
You need to first build an understanding and trust and like become true colleagues and teammates with the people that you're coaching. That it's not for them to know, especially since you never know, again, every person's different, what their background experience with a coach is going to be. And some of them have had experiences that I wouldn't call true coaching, right. An experience of judgment, when really I'm not there to judge you. And coaching is for everyone, it's not like, oh, only new teachers or only bad teachers. No, actually it's a wonderful thing that, that it shows we're all learners and we all want to grow, and that I'm learning tons through coaching as well. I'm not teaching you, I'm here to collaborate and grow together. And yeah, of course I bring different skill sets, and that's why I'm a coach, but it's about helping each other. So I think really setting that tone and establishing a relationship with whoever you're going to be coaching with, and talking about what are your student-centered goals together, and what might it look like when you're in the classroom together, and just making things really clear that they feel trusted, that they feel like it's safe and not a judgment zone is super, super important. I think no matter where you're at or who you're working with.
Yes. And
next up, Kristen Zimke shares her changing perspective on consumption versus creation with technology.
As well as I've kind of had a shift in thinking in the last couple of years, so long with digital learning was about creating, and making and making and making. And I think we've improved on that. We still have a long way to go. But I also now see the benefit of critical consumption, right? Because it's always creators, not consumers in a progressive EdTech world. But if we go one way, then we're totally missing something else. And I think in order to deeply understand a topic or a research project, kids need to consume and have strategies for doing it in a thoughtful manner. I also think that they need to consume so that they know what a good media project looks like. How do you know what a good video looks like if you haven't spent time watching documentaries or breaking down and analyzing them? And my writing partner, Katie, and I refer to that as mentor tech. We've had mentor techs in reading and writing workshop for such a long time. It absolutely makes sense. That's one of those things that transfer. What are the high quality examples or spaces you can go to get the idea for work that you might want to use or replicate?
In our final peek for today, Emily McLean, also featured in our Women Who Lead project, talks about how creating a culture of growth mindset starts with school leadership.
As a leader of the school, I think it starts with me. I need to be able to be vulnerable and say I don't always know all the answers. we were looking at one of the how we might assess unit of inquiry and brainstorming some of the ideas that, what would help us as a school better assess units of inquiry. And, we went to one staff meeting and said, hey, what if we had one kind of generic rubric? What are your thoughts? This is one idea we've been thinking of. There's another idea that we do it this way. What do you think of these two things? And really, as we started talking about it, and up front we said, we know this is the problem and we need a solution over here, but we don't know where that journey is, and take the journey with us. Well, if we all get on board, we'll figure it out together, but you don't always have to know the answer as a leader. This is my first role as a deputy, and I will say that I have made many mistakes along the way, but they are good mistakes because I've learned from them and grown a lot. And this is my second year in the role now, so I know that there's been a lot of growth in that time. And I have no doubt as I move into my role for third year next year that there'll be just as many mistakes that are different and continue to grow from them as well.
These are not all the episodes we're sharing this year, but we hope this gives you a sneak peek into what we're thinking about and reflecting on with our amazing guests. If you enjoyed this, you will love what we're sharing on COACHBETTER TV and on our social media at Eduro Learning. We have so many more ways for you to learn with us this academic year. Make sure to check them out at edurolearning.com.